Hi, I'm Amanda Morrell with Interest.co. I'm here today with Nigel Tate, President of the Institute of Financial Advisors. We're here with another double shot interview. This is where we get our chance to interview heads of various sectors and CEOs and whatnot. So welcome to the show, Nigel.
Thank you, Amanda.
Excellent. So you're here to talk to us today about KiwiSaver and how well prepared or not prepared the industry is to handle this and the dissemination of information around it. There's just a whole wealth of information and some confusing aspects of KiwiSaver. What's the industry done so far to prepare for, I guess, addressing some of the public's questions and concerns they might have about KiwiSaver?
I don't know that the industry as such or the profession as such has done anything specifically around KiwiSaver, but certainly around investment planning. There's been a lot of work in terms of additional training, in some cases specifically around KiwiSaver, but that's the exception as opposed to the rule.
Okay, so are financial advisors or planners necessarily the best people to be informing people who might want to probe a little bit deeper, whether they're in the right fund or who the provider is, or are you just kind of part of a bigger puzzle of information that people ought to go to?
Certainly we're collaborative in terms of there are other areas that members of the public could be going to and should be going to do some research prior to maybe having a discussion with a financial advisor. Okay,
so what benefit would the public have in being able to consult with a financial advisor or somebody within your membership group? What are they going to get out of it?
Hopefully what our members will be providing to the members of the public is an opportunity for them to set some objectives and some goals and some timeframes. And that will help them, of course, set their KiwiSaver objectives, but it won't, at the same time, ignore other areas of their financial planning or financial advising sectors or requirements.
Okay. Are you finding, or I don't know what the feedback is from your membership so far, but is there a lot of interest? Are people starting to kind of pay closer attention to their KiwiSavers and wanting to drill down to find out what's going on there?
Interesting enough, as KiwiSaver grows, 5.5 billion funds under management collectively, there is greater interest. Certainly it's from an advisor's perspective, as a product, it's not a marketable product in terms of profitability, but as a part of an overall service to the clients, it's definitely a part of it, and there's a greater sense of focus in that area as the funds will grow, both in terms of the planner but also the client.
I'm sure it's no surprise to you that KiwiSaver has its foes and critics out there. Some people think you'd be better off investing in a term deposit and riding that out over 20 years rather than seeing your returns eaten away by some of the fees out there. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, look, the KiwiSaver fees generally are quite low, and I don't know that the likes of term deposits is really a fair comparison between a growth KiwiSaver portfolio and a term deposit. They're there for certain benefits to the client, and they're there for different reasons. Yeah.
In terms of other retail managed funds that are out on the market, though, if somebody's kind of exploring, if they'd be better off in a different channel as opposed to KiwiSaver, what kind of advice do you have for them then?
That once again goes back to their goals and objectives and timeframes. Okay. And if they've established those goals and objectives clearly and they're time bound, that's really what's going to determine where the funds should be invested. Okay. Now, if it's long-term for retirement planning needs, then KiwiSaver is a great place to start. And now, of course, not confusing KiwiSaver with a product, it's a process. Okay. But a product under the KiwiSaver suite is a great place to start, simply because of the actual additional benefits that you receive as an employee from your employer subsidy and the government subsidy as well.
So the exact numbers are a bit murky for me, but there's a huge number of people that are still languishing in default funds, although default funds ironically perform the best so far over the last 3.5 years. But increasingly you hear from people in the industry that you should be moving out of those default funds and exposing yourself to more growth assets. Why is that?
Once again, it's that timing of the investment time frame or time horizons. For a lot of young folk who have defaulted into KiwiSaver, they've gone into a cash or a fixed interest fund. On average, if it's earning around about 3%, it's equivalent to about a term deposit in reality, except for the fact that it's locked in until you're eligible for New Zealand Super. However, if they are in the 20 to 35 age bracket, it's highly likely that they should be looking at growth funds because over that period of time, growth's going to outperform fixed interest and cash. Most likely.
And that's a bit of a can for us at the moment.
Absolutely.
And there's criticism now that, are you really going to get what you pay for in a growth fund when you factor in fees and taxes and whatnot? So What, what if I...
There's no silver bullet, really. At the end of the day, everybody's going to pay fees.
Yeah.
Whether they're in a growth fund or an income fund, income-focused fund, they're still going to pay fees. It will be slightly less, of course, but actively managed, growth-oriented portfolios, whether they're inside KiwiSaver structures or outside, are acknowledged long-term are most likely to outperform the income-type funds. Yeah. And the significance to a 20-year-old is huge. Yeah. We're talking about a 20-year-old on average, so let's say $30,000, contributing to KiwiSaver with subsidy from their employer and the government. The difference between an income fund at say 3% and a growth fund even at 6% over the 45 years through to retirement is in excess of $250,000. And that's what they give up by remaining in the default funds. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with default funds for members of the public who are in their latter years, heading closer to retirement, 5 to 10 years out from retirement. No problems with those funds, they are quite appropriate. But there are definitely age bands for appropriate structures in KiwiSaver.
Who's the segment of the population that would least benefit from being in a KiwiSaver plan?
Obviously the ones that are closest to retirement, because they have less opportunity for it to compound. Whereas the 20-year-old, the compounding effect, that extra $250,000 on their same contributions, there's far greater benefit while you're young.
A lot of young people, though, are drowning in debt. They've got enamored with credit cards, and they're struggling with that. For them, that sector of the population, does it make sense to be in a KiwiSaver plan when you've got all this debt kind of chasing you?
Certainly, I believe that over the long term, you're better off to have that balance between the two. If you've got, for example, a home mortgage, and everybody would like to get rid of their mortgage early. There's no two ways about that. And that's financially, it's a good thing to do. The difficulty, of course, is that in New Zealand, generally speaking, they will go out and get another mortgage. And so we end up in a situation where at the end of the day, they've got a beautiful freehold home and no income. So a good balance between those two objectives is really the best way to establish an overall plan. So it's not just one size fits all. Every client, and within those age bands there are going to be different risk profiles, different attitudes towards risk, and so we've got to take all of that into account as well. Okay,
so just to review, what are some of the factors that people should bear in mind when they're considering what fund they should be in?
Okay, well the first thing is they need to decide should they be in KiwiSaver, and that's a number one decision. Number two decision is if they're going into KiwiSaver, how long are they likely to be in there? If they're New Zealanders, born and bred, and they're staying here until they retire, and they're in their early working years, growth funds, generally speaking, will be the better option for them. There will be times, of course, where they underperform income funds, and then there'll be times where they'll outperform. But overall, the history has shown us that they'll outperform long term. So those are the sorts of decisions. The actual product that you use is almost, well, at this stage anyway, it's almost irrelevant. Starting out, the difference between one fund manager and the another is not going to make enough difference. It's more about gaining the amount of support that you can get going into it with your employer and with the government. And so if you can get, I think it works out about $25,000, $26,000 a year, at that point you get maximum subsidy, 100% subsidy from your employer, 100% from the government. So you're getting 200% return on your contributions before you invest it. So that equates to a mortgage costing around about 2.5%. And if your mortgage is costing 2.5%, you should be very, very pleased, because when you compound that through, you're going to be better off in KiwiSaver, in my view.
How much weight should people put on these performance benchmarks? We get these quarterly reports now, and they're all over the show, and a lot of people are chopping and changing increasingly, from what I understand. Is performance any indication of how well your fund is doing?
Not in and of itself. It's performance relative to your objectives. Okay. So in terms of comparing performance from one product to another, you need to make sure that you're comparing an apple with an apple and an orange with an orange. Okay. And not really comparing an income fund or a default fund with a high growth fund, because they will both perform, hopefully, negatively correlated. They'll be performing well at different times, and so making sure that we get the right comparison is very important.
You hear the industry defending itself against these accusations about fee gouging and whatnot, and you've said they're actually relatively low profit margins, yet some people maintain that fees are the killer in KiwiSaver, and that's the #1 criteria you should look at. Who do you believe?
Yeah, okay. Well, fees do kill performance when performance is down.
Yeah.
That's simple. And of course, over the last couple of years, if you look at the 3-year performance figures, most of them are in negative. Not all of them, but most of them are in negative territory. Yeah. We've just been through some of the worst years in the financial markets for a long, long time. And so we can expect them to be down. But as I said earlier on, the majority of the time they will outperform, and the fees in a KiwiSaver scheme are, as compared to a retail open fund, very, very cheap.
Yeah. What would be some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about being in a KiwiSaver fund? What are you hearing?
Oh, it's scary. Some of the things that we hear. One I heard was that a lady from China was over in New Zealand, living here, studying, chose not to go into KiwiSaver because when she went home, as she was likely to do, she'd have to give up the money and wouldn't get it. Another one is that KiwiSaver fund, when you pass away, goes back to the government. Yeah. And it's really a lack of understanding of the structure around KiwiSaver. And so financial literacy is a hugely important element in planning for retirement.
Okay, and just one last question. The whole portability issue with Australia, you're under KiwiSaver, you're allowed to bring back some of your money if you worked over in Australia back into your KiwiSaver?
Absolutely.
But I've heard people saying that you'd be better off leaving it over there because actually the performance and the currency, you know, in the long run, there's no point in bringing it here, repatriating your KiwiSaver. Yeah. So what do you...
Once again, it depends on where it's invested. If it's in Australia, it depends on where it's invested through the Australian fund manager, because they're having the same issues as us. I mean, just look at the Australian share market as a prime example. If it's invested domestically, then the Australian share market's well underperformed the New Zealand share market. So again, if you're bringing it from a domestically structured equity fund to a New Zealand structured equity fund, you actually should be better off. Well, you would have been over the last 12 months. Okay. Who knows what's going to happen next year?
All right. Thanks, Nigel, for coming to Interest.co and sharing your information on KiwiSaver. I'm Amanda Morell with Interest.co with another Double Shot interview.